In this video, I'm going to be painting up the latest Warhammer 40k Scout Squad, but I'm also going to be building some terrain to go alongside them. I'm going to be using a whole bunch of recycling that have come from all my 3D printing to see if I can take things like old spools, failed prints, and throw all of that together into something that looks pretty damned good. At least I hope it does. This video is sponsored by Phrozen, who sent over my resin 3D printers. I've been using the Mega 8K for quite some time now, which lets you print off some massive things. And granted, I could print off loads of this terrain just on the printer itself, but I figured it'd be a much more fun project to take loads of bits that I printed on that and print something that's just a little bit more unique. So lately I've gone down the Blood Angels rabbit hole and I've been painting up loads and loads of bits for them. Probably too much, and it's been a massive distraction. When the Scout Squad came out, I needed some Scouts because I loved the old Scouts, and the new set basically does what all the old ones did, takes all of those unique designs, and they basically look almost identical to the old ones, but scaled more appropriately for modern 40k and just look a little bit less goofy. The problem is I need some 40k terrain, and that's where this project came to life. I wanted to build something that was a little bit different, that would be playable as well, and give me some verticality for my games too. I saw loads of different sets online that I could 3D print, and I did like the look of them, but I wanted to do something a little bit different and a little bit more thematic. A lot of the time it's just big old industrial, either like rigs or like ruins, and I figured why not make something a little bit different and some gooiness in there as well. Now, a bit of foreshadowing, I made a big mess. Like my desk became a massive old water effect. We'll come on to that in a bit. So all of my Marines are now glued together, and they were quite a fiddly little kit to put together. They're all right in the end, but it took me ages to get it done. The thing that I hated on them was the mold lines. There were some serious mold lines on that. But alas, we can move on from that. And now we're on to putting together the terrain. And I wanted to do something, like I said at the beginning of the video, of recycling a lot of 3D printed bits. So I've got all of these spools that are going to make some great little bases, and then I've got loads of bits that are like failed 3D prints. So in this box here I've got loads of things, and anybody who does 3D printing who tells you that it's just plug and play, you download the file and it's good to go, is a liar, or they've been blessed by the 3D printing gods and they are just like the luckiest person in the world. You've got to dial in your settings. If you change to do like a different resin, for example, you've also got to dial in your settings again and make sure they work. And most people will dial in with like a small miniature because that makes sense. I was dialing in with terrain for some strange reason because I've got a big project upcoming that I wanted to get my printers prepped for. And I've got some bits here that have come out pretty nicely, but there's just a few bits in here where the exposure wasn't high enough, so therefore they kind of came off the supports a little bit and slipped. So I'm going to use up all of those. I'm also going to use some supports as well, because I figured you throw away all of these supports after removing them from the model. So why not use them in some terrain bits? So I've got all these bits here. Some bits are printed perfectly fine. Some bits are a little bit failed. Some supports in there as well. And using the spools for like the FDM printers and stuff like that. Because why not recycle the whole bit? Got some cork. Got some rocks. Got some sculptor mold. Let's go wild. Okay, these are all done, and now they are ready for the painting and priming stage. I like them. I used a lot of sculptor mode over these, so I stuck it all down and I just basically kind of eyeballed it to see where I wanted pieces to go. For one of the big pieces, where is it? Here. So I've got this kind of like railing that's going across it, and then I've got all this broken one at the bottom here. Now, it wasn't this broken when I first got it out. I tried to snap it, and it was a lot stronger than I expected, even after giving it such a good curing. So I grabbed a weight and I just smashed it on top of it, and it shattered. It like went mad. So I stuck it down on this so it looks as though it has like fallen and snapped and smashed or been blown up in an explosion. I really like the way this looks. So next I need to get it all primed. Now I'll prime it all along with my scouts as well. I have an interesting idea. So I've got some of these that have like the raised bit that's coming out, and I figured they could be like tanks full of like radioactive stuff. And then in the middle of these other little ones, for example, I'm going to print off like a little circular base that goes underneath it. They're going to use some like water effects on there and mix it with some like green or something like that. So it looks like there's these green watery pools that are kind of coming out of here. And those tanks are basically milking the planet, because if anyone in a sci-fi setting is going to milk a planet, it's going to be the Imperium of Man. Because it's just the kind of thing that they would do, because they want the natural resources. And I figured that's what these pools can be, these big tanks, what's all been fought over and stuff like that. So we'll see how that turns out. So over to the airbrush, let's get spraying. So painting the terrain was really simple with this. I basically got it all primed black, and then I hit it with some greys from above. As I was going over with all the greys, I was starting to look at those pools and figure out what was I going to do with these. And I wanted to have a nice radioactive base coming from it, because I wanted my water effects to go over the top of this, but it needed to glow from below. Now in the past when I've done some things and I wanted to get a nice glow, I've used this Gauze Green Airflow by Army Painter, and it works really nicely and it gets a really nice vibrant glow on there. So I figured this is probably going to be the one to go for. So I sprayed that into the middle of all of these. So in the tanks, for example, I got some of it in there. In the middle of those pools, for example, I got it on there. And then once I'd got all of that done, I just got my airbrush as low as I could down to the rocks and sprayed it from above to try and get some reflection from that. And I think that came out quite nicely. It caught like all the edges of the rocks and stuff like that. So it looked like I had this glowing radioactive pool in the middle, and then all the bits around it were getting some light from this radioactive pool. Once I'd done all of my airbrushing and bits, I then moved over to the painting table, and basically I've relied on dry brushing for this stage. So I used a mix of different like greys and different creams just to pick out some of those edges and some of those details, and things were starting to look nice at this stage. Now, once I'd got all of my dry brushing done, it was over to a wash. I used a couple of different things here. So I started off with a wash that I'd mixed up ages ago, but it had far too much dish soap in there, which was suddenly really difficult to say. And it was just not showing up, and I don't know what was happening. I don't know if the mix that I was using underneath of it to build the terrain, I think that was just soaking it all in, so that was becoming a bit of an issue. And I should have probably sealed this before moving on to the painting stage, but I didn't, so learn from my mistakes. I then moved over to an oil wash, so I mixed up a nice oil wash, a black oil wash, to put over all the metallic bits and get over some of those rocks as well. And although it was still drinking up a lot of that wash, it was leaving a lot more of the black on the surface, so I started to get some nice contrast and bits there. So that's all of my dry brushing done, all my washing done, and now it's time to make that chemically goodness look a little bit more like actual watery chemicals. So I'm going to use this AK Interactive still water. I've used it a couple of times and never got the greatest results. It looks okay. My biggest fear is how well have I sealed that plastic base that's on the bottom of the terrain, because if I haven't, it's going to go all over my desk. So let me know in the comments, how big of an issue is this going to end up turning into? Let me know what disaster is this going to turn into, or do you have faith in me? Am I going to get it right? Hey, I'll soon find out. So, coming back to that foreshadowing that was at the beginning of the video, yeah, one of these leaked and it went all over my desk. I just completely hadn't sealed it up properly. And luckily for me, I was being impatient, so I came back after like half an hour to see how it was setting. And one of them was perfectly fine, but the other one, it was awful over the place. That took some cleaning up, and then the next day I came back and I decided to repeat the process, which might sound mad, but my thoughts were that all of those water effects would have been like hardened around the side and sealed it, and they did, so it didn't leak again, which is a good thing. But I really like the way these are looking. The terrain, I think, looks fantastic with that glow effect and everything else in there. Just really adds this nice, I don't know, radioactive type pool with the glossy water over the top of it. They've got a few puddles in there as well. Just adds a little bit something different. So once I'd got all of these scouts put together, which like I said was a painful process, it was onto the painting stage for these. And honestly, they're quite easy to paint, and I really like painting red at the moment. In fact, I've liked painting red for quite some time. So for this, I literally just primed them all red with my airbrush, and then I hit them with two different paints through my airbrush. So the base layer that I used to get the red for my Blood Angels is I use this Army Painter Wall Paint in Carmine Red as like the base layer. It's quite a nice dark but vibrant red. And then I hit it all from above with Pure Red by Army Painter through the airbrush. And these two just really add a lot of depth in there, you get a lot of shadow, and then you get some really nice highlights as well. If you're doing a vehicle, or when I do vehicles anyway, I also use Archangel Red as like the absolute highlight, and that leans more into an orange, but it blends really nicely with all those like base layers that you've done. When it's on units, however, I tend to glaze this Andrea colour, and it is number 4. I'll have it linked as well so you can find that. But when it comes to painting on red, I really like this Andrea colour set. There's 3 in there that I use as like my triad system for reds, and it always comes out looking lovely. For all things like the weapons, I tend to just go for black, so things like the Chesterquiller, weapons, chainsword, all like the pouches and bits like that. So I just use Black Legion contrast paint. It's got such a nice coverage and it goes on really, really easy. And then just highlight it all with grey. For all bits on the weapons as well, I just add a little bit of silver on there. Things like the blade on the chainsaw gets a bit of silver as well. And throw a little bit of silver bits just all over the place. For all things like the trousers, or pants, depending where you're from, sleeves and stuff like that, any material on them, I then just used some cream, went back over that and used like a little highlight of white, and then threw an Agrax Earthshade wash over it, and then just blended it all nicely. For a lot of these, I added a little bit of chipping, and for this, I just to go for the really simple sponge, bit of silver on there, in a paintbrush lid, and then start like jabbing my model. It's not the most precise thing in the world, but I always think it looks pretty effective at the end of the day. It doesn't add too much on there, and you get some nice weather damage on like all the armor panels. So pretty much everything is now done on these scouts, but I've well and truly messed up this cloak. So I wanted to go for the same sort of green that I use across the whole army, so I have a lot of like green lights and eye lenses and stuff like that. And I tried doing some wet blending, which didn't go particularly well. So then I tried dry brushing over the top of that and then doing like a glaze over it to bring it all together. But it just doesn't look right. So I'm going to try and fix it. And I figured why not just experiment and just go wild with this. So I'm going to do some sponging on it. And I figured I'll keep that same light colour underneath it and then like sponge over the top of it with some darker greens and just build up those greens so it looks like camouflage. I don't know if this is going to work, but I guess we'll find out. That cloak turned out so much better than I was expecting. I basically went over with those like green dabbing and then gradually built it up. I think it worked really, really nicely. At first I didn't like it, and the trick that I found for this that made it work better was putting like a wash over the top of it. So I used Agrax Earthshade just over the top, and that just blended all of those colours together quite nicely. I'm really happy with this. Actually, I really now want to do an army, so maybe like an Imperial Guard or something like that with that sort of effect on it. Very happy with that. Really easy to do, really simple, and looks quite effective. In hindsight now, I wish all the trousers were that camo. But they're not, but I'm definitely not going to go back in there and do it. And that is them all done. The terrain and my Blood Angel Scout Squad. And I am really happy with these. The whole thing, in fact, I'm really happy with. I really like the terrain. I wasn't sure how it was going to turn out, because basically it was a whole mishmash of different parts. I had failed resin 3D prints. I had supports that I'd stuck on there as well. I also had these like FDM spools, so I had no idea what it was going to turn out like. But I am really happy with the end result. I think it looks fantastic, and it kind of goes to show that if you have like resin failed prints, keep them, because you might be able to do something. Like for example, if you've got a resin 3D printed tank or a vehicle or something that you're doing there and you've got some failed parts, keep them, because you can then throw them into the terrain and have like this destroyed vehicle as well. So don't throw them away, get them cleaned up, get them cured, and think about what you could do differently with them. A lot of things like spools, I know a lot of them now recyclable because they're cardboard, but again, you can think about what sort of thing you can do with those. And now Phrozen have just introduced their new FDM printer, which has got my interest peaked, because that means if you are also doing a lot of terrain and stuff like that, it'll be a pretty great printer for you. Granted, there's a whole range of different printers. You can use something like the Mega 8KS, which is Phrozen's big resin printer, and you get some gorgeous looking terrain, but then it can be a bit more fiddly in the cleanup and stuff like that. Or you can use their new FDM printer and just go wild with some terrain. Or you can do like I've done and do a mismatch of everything and just get all your recycled parts and throw them together and see what comes out. So let me know in the comments, what do you think? Do you like what I've done here? Do you not like what I've done here? And should I expand this? I really like this idea, this big like radioactive mining world. Don't entirely know how that fits with the lore, but I like it, and I might have to expand it because I've had a lot of fun building this. Now granted, I don't get that many failures when it comes to resin. It tends to be when I'm dialing in like a new FEP or maybe a new resin, for example. But if I do get failures, I'm going to keep them like I suggested to you guys. So thanks so much to Phrozen for sponsoring this video. It's been a blast just playing around with all these different bits and thinking outside the box about how I can use different things that I wouldn't normally use in my crafting to create some different types of terrain, and giving me a bit more narrative in my head for how these are going to turn out. So thanks for watching, and if you want to grab any of the products from Phrozen that I've talked about in this video, then head on down to the links in the description. You can find them all there.